I dare say that everyone here would say yes to the statement of Scripture. With God, all things are possible. I don't think you'd be here if you did not believe in God. And the God to whom all things are possible. But maybe we stop right there and we separate man from God. And my purpose is to show you that we are not two, that we are one. That same creative word that created the universe and sustains it dwells in us. Therefore with God all things are possible. And therefore with man all things are possible. So he states it in one book, Matthew, with God all things are possible. But in Mark he states it, all things are possible to him, meaning man, who believes. Can man believe? So this creative word is in us. Well, what is this creative word? It's your own wonderful human imagination. That's Christ in man. Man is all imagination. So when you say I am, that's he. Now can you believe that you are now the man that you would like to be, though at the moment of your assumption, reason denies it, and your senses deny it? Can you really conceive a scene which, if true, would imply the fulfillment of your dream? What would it feel like if it were true? How would I feel if I were now the man that I would like to be? How would I know that I could become it? Well, I first, as I assume that I am it, let me think of my friends. Those who really would rejoice with me were it true. Let me imagine that I am seeing them in my mind's eye. How do they see me? If what I am assuming is true, they should see me as I am seeing myself. And if they are friends, they should rejoice with me. So let me now assume that I am seeing, reflected on the face of a friend, that which, if I saw it, would imply he sees in me that which I have assumed that I am. Will that work? Try it. I tell you from my own personal experience it works. It doesn't work itself. I can tell you that your imagination is Christ. And maybe you'll believe me. But unless you actually take it to the point of working upon it and operating it, it means nothing. Well, if this night I really believe it, I would not allow the sun to go down in my sleep unless I feel myself right into the situation of the wish fulfilled. What would you feel like if now you were the man that you want to be? How would you see the world if things were as you desire them to be? Now this is what I mean by living in the end. Robert Frost, just the year before he departed this sphere, he wrote this story for Life magazine. And he said the founding fathers did not believe in the future. What a shock that they did not believe in the future. They believed it in. He said we are always imagining ahead of our evidence. And the most creative thing in man is to believe a thing in. They had no evidence to support their claim to democracy. They were under a king when they threw the king away and began to simply build a concept of the future. They did not believe that the mere passage of time would bring them that dream. They believed it in. And these men believed implicitly in the Word of God. And they believed that if I know what I want, when I pray, believe that I have received it, and I will. Well, if that precept is true, literally true, to be accepted literally and fulfilled literally, well then what am I doing not believing? I should actually know exactly what I would like to be, and discovering what I would like to be as against what I seem to be, dare to assume that I am it. And my assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. But if I really know what I want, what you want, what we want, and persuade myself that we have it, if my premise is sound, that imagining creates reality, I should, in the not distant future, hear you tell me that it's worked for you, and the other one tells me, and I in turn tell you, and go through life sharing this marvelous news with others. So I say, live as though it were true. Just as though it were true. If the Word is truly the Word that creates the system in which we live. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. By him all things were made, and without him was not anything made that was made. No, not even the so-called unlovely things. For if all things were made, he has to be responsible for the unlovely things as well. So we are told in Scripture, I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. I create the blessing, I create the curses. But now I must choose life. Choose the lovely things, but don't say there's another creator. For if there's another creator, then we are in conflict. So my own imagination can conjure unlovely things if I dwell upon them, or the lovely things. But they can't be two gods. There can't be two creators. And if I can find that creator and identify him with my own wonderful human imagination, then I can pass the buck. I can turn to anything and blame it for the things happening in my life. But I know that many of us are not discriminating, and when we see our own harvest, we don't recognize it. We can conceive that we, in some strange manner, permitted these things to be entertained by us. But we did. It could not have come to pass in any other way. So if I believe it and accept it, well then I will live by it. And then when I know what I want for anyone, and this goes for everything in this world, whether now, this very moment, you desire happiness in marriage. You say, but there's not one person in my world that's eligible. I know no one. You don't have to know anyone. All you have to do is to decide within yourself what you want. Now, what would you do if it were true? Would you wear a ring on the one finger which would imply that someone placed it there, one that you admire? Well then, wear it there. Don't wear a physical ring. Put it on just as though he had placed it there. And sleep feeling that which you are feeling as real. Now catch the mood and try to give that mood all the sensory vividness of reality, all the tones of reality, and then sleep in it, just as though it were true. And then await the inevitable. The inevitable is you're going to resurrect it and objectify it on the screen of space. And then the world will call it real. And they may not believe you. It doesn't really matter. If you tell them it came to pass because you simply imagined it. Now, they'll point to the series of events that led up to it. And they will give credit to the bridge of incident across which you walked towards the fulfillment of that state. And they'll point out some physical thing that was the cause. No, the cause is invisible, for the cause is God. And God is invisible to mortal eye. Who knows what you're imagining? No one knows. But you can sit down and imagine, and no one can stop you from doing it. But can you give reality to the imagined state? If you do, yes, a bridge of incident will appear in your world. And you'll walk across some series of events leading up to the fulfillment of the imaginal state. But don't give causation to any physical step that you took towards the fulfillment of it. You imagined yourself having a marvelous business. And then comes the day a building is for sale, and you haven't a nickel towards it. And not a total stranger, but a man comes in and asks you quite in a friendly manner, are you going to buy it? And knowing you don't have a penny, you say to him, as you would a friend to a friend, with what? And then he said, well, I have money. It's only in the bank drawing nothing. You say, but I have no collateral. Well, he said, I've watched you. You're an honest person. Your family, they're honest. I think they are. Would you like me to buy it for you? I'll get my lawyer to bid for it. If they knew that I'm bidding, that I have money, they'll bid me up. And so I get it at the very lowest price by getting a lawyer who represents more than one client, and they do not know who he represents, and he'll bid for it. Are you willing to take it regardless of the price? And you say, yes. I'll take it. But I have no collateral. All I need is your signature, that you will simply pay 6% on whatever the price is, and then reduce that principal over a period of 10 years. Agreed? Yes. But then sign this, and we'll see if we can buy it. That day, you owned the building. And you didn't have one nickel when you owned the building that day. You only had your signature on a piece of paper. At the end of 10 years, you repaid the man his principal. You reduce it every year, paying him 6% on the remaining principal, and reduce the entire thing at the end of 10 years. That man dies, 20 years later, and leaves you $150,000 in cash, tax-free, and a couple of homes and many personal belongings. In the meanwhile, you continue in that business, and it multiplies and multiplies. And that year was 1922, 1924. This is now 1968. That building, I'm speaking factually, that building in 1924 is now gone. He paid only $50,000 for it. It was repaid and repaid. A bank 3 years ago bought the property, because the building was rotted, bought the property for $840,000 in cash and no capital gain, from $50,000 to $840,000. In the meanwhile, the business has expanded into all the other islands, so that today you couldn't buy them out for $15 million. All in imagination. And this goes back to the imagination that preceded this man's offer to buy the building. For the young man seeing this building and entertaining a thought that the present owners deceived his father, and through deception got him out of a partnership, a junior partnership. And he was moved not to get even, but to prove that he really had something within him and could be a success in spite of their deception. And so every day he would see on that marquee not their name, but his own family's name. And he would see it in his mind's eye, because you could not take their name and transliterate it and make it spell this man's family's name. But he saw it, and in his mind's eye he saw that name, which if true would imply the family owned it. He did it every day, twice a day, for 2 years. And then came this sudden, out of the nowhere. And the whole thing was made possible, and today they're all over the islands. And they have no partners. They've never taken in one partner, never sold one bit of stock outside of a family ownership. All by imagination. Now, I know what I'm talking about because I am a member of that family. I'm speaking of my own family. This is not hearsay. I know it. My second brother, Victor, was the one in whose imagination this whole thing began to bloom. And he still works all by imagination. He knows what he wants, and then after having decided in himself, that's what I want, and that's good for the business, he then in his mind's eye, he appropriates it. And then let things happen. As told us in Scripture, the vision has its own appointed hour. It ripens, it will flower. If it be long, then wait, for it is sure, and it will not be late. Read that in the book of Habakkuk. Here is the true translation of that passage in Habakkuk. So when you know what you want, remain faithful to that assumption. And the assumption, though at the moment, is denied by your senses and denied by reason. If you persist in it, it will harden into fact. Are we not told that God calls a thing that is not seen as though it were seen, and then the unseen becomes seen? He calls everything from the unseen into the seen in this simple manner. For he is the resurrecting power. So if I assume that I am, I don't have to have evidence to support it. I assume that I am. I am what? Well, I name it. And having given it a name, given it form, given it definition, remaining in it, I resurrect it. And if it takes 1,000 men to aid the birth of that state, 1,000 men will play their parts. And I don't have to go out and look for them, any more than my brother had to go out and look for this man. He would not have known where to start looking for one the day of the sale. As far as he is concerned, he had done it in his mind's eye, and he allowed everything to happen. And he comes right in like a joke. He really thought it was a joke. And he said to this man, are you fooling me? He said, no. He said, well then wait, let me call my father. He's at lunch. He called him on the wire. He said, Daddy, come on up. Leave everything and come. And then he said, now you tell my father what you told me. My father's name is Joseph. And my father said, you really mean it? He said, yes, Joe, I mean it. I'll have him bid today. You put your signature here, and your son Victor put his signature. That's all I need. And that was a lifetime friendship. So when that man died, he didn't owe my brother Victor anything. He so loved the friendship and the feeling of, well, decency that he had with my brother Victor. He gave him $150,000 in cash. And that was tax-free. And the homes, everything was tax-free. And that building, which he bought for $50,000, was sold 3 years ago to the Bank of Nova Scotia. They tore it down and built a lovely structure, but they paid our family $840,000 for that building. So here was a gain, and there was no capital tax gain. None. That whole thing was simply free. So I know what I'm talking about. All I need from you is the acceptance of it. Will you believe it? Will you believe that with God all things are possible? Will you believe that all things are possible to men? Well, you can prove it in the not distant future. But you are the operant power. It will not work itself. If you dare to assume this very night that you have a better job than you now hold, or that you have a larger income, you may be fired tomorrow. Don't be concerned. On reflection, you'll see it was necessary to move you towards the fulfillment of your assumption. You could be fired. And I wouldn't bat an eye if you told me tomorrow, well, I did what you told me. You know what happened? I was fired. I have seen that. It takes someone to fire you to get you into a better job. I have seen that time and again. I wouldn't go out and quit the job. You may be promoted in the job, or you may be invited by some other concern that is competitive to join them. I do not know how it happens. I only know if you remain faithful to the assumption, it's going to happen. And you're going to be promoted towards the fulfillment of the state that you have dared to assume that is yours. I could tell you unnumbered stories along this nature. So here I say, dwell in the end. The end is where we begin. For if I've seen my name on the marquee, that's the end. I don't wait for the incident to take place in my world to move from one to the other, leading up to that. I dwell in the end. If I go to the very end, what would it be like were it true? A health case, not how it's going to become better, but you go to the end, and you say to someone who isn't well, and in your mind's eye you say to them, you know, I've never seen you look better. And have them say to you, I've never felt better. Well, now that's confirmation of what you're seeing. You say, I've never seen you look better. And hear them say to you, well, I have never really felt better. So you can do this for good or ill. I advise you, do it for good. But the choice is yours. You can hurt and you can bless, but don't hurt. Use your imagination always lovingly on behalf of others. But to tell you that you couldn't do it to hurt is stupid, because you can hurt. But it's entirely up to you. So you imagine what you want. Believe that you have it, and see how it works in the world. Those who scoff at it, or let them scoff. 5 years from now, when you're on the top, they may be working for you. And they've even forgotten that they sat in the same audience with you when you heard and believed, and they also heard, but they didn't believe. And so you moved on, and they remained behind. And that's life. So tonight, you need not confine it to yourself. Take a friend, without the friend's consent, without the friend's knowledge, and lift him up. Do you know of a friend who is unemployed? Well, then see him gainfully employed. And don't tell him that you may brag tomorrow. Don't boast. Just see him gainfully employed. Here's a friend of mine in L.A., and this man was unmercifully bawled out by his superiors and told that he was no earthly good, and they are considering letting him go. They're going to fire him. Well, the man had no support outside of the job, and he had a family. So he told my friend, well, my friend lives by this law. So he said to him, all right, go your way. Didn't tell him what he was going to do. He sat quietly at his desk and heard the man tell him that they praised him beyond measure for something that he had done. It wasn't 48 hours that the complete reversal of their attitude towards this man in their praise of something he did in the advertising world. But the blow had left its mark. And he said to my friend, Yes, they've reversed it, but I don't feel easy on the job. Because they could not have said the unlovely things that they said and forgotten them. So it will come back, and I'm going to quit. I have no money. I'm giving them 2 weeks' notice. I'm going to ask them to give me 1 week of the 2, that I may get myself together, maybe take off a few days, and just get my thoughts in order. Well, at the end of 2 weeks, he didn't have a job. My friend, when he told him what he was going to do, my friend knew he could not afford to quit and not work. So he saw him gainfully employed and earning 25% more than the present job. He took off the 2nd week. When he came back at the end of the 1st week, he came into my friend's office and said, only yesterday I got the offer and I start Monday. I do not lose 1 day's salary and I start at 25% more than I received on the past job. What did it? My friend's imagination. A loving use of the imagination on behalf of a friend. Had he gone without that imaginal state, he'd have walked into the place and the man would have said, we have nothing. Or we can't use you. Why are you quitting? He didn't ask anything, he simply wanted the man. So if you precede your visit by an imaginal act, they will see you as you see yourself. If you walk in knowing that you're no good, they're going to see you exactly that way. But if you're walking in the assumption that things are as you desire them to be, they're going to see you that way. And this is life. Now, what greater claim can anyone make than to claim that he is God? When he claimed it, they said he is blaspheming. For here is a man, and the man dares to claim he is God. The 10th of John. And he said, is it not written in your law, I say ye are gods, sons of the Most High? If he called them gods to whom the word of God came, do you say of the one that he anointed and sent into the world that he is blaspheming? Do you know of any greater claim in the world than for a man to identify himself with God and walk as though he were? And not be ashamed to admit it? He doesn't go bragging about it, but he knows in his heart he is one with God. For if his imagination is God and he imagines, well then that's God. And if he imagines a state and it comes to pass, then he knows the creative power that is God. He doesn't have to brag about it and boast about it, but he doesn't have to hide it either. He doesn't have to bury it and be ashamed of it. He sleeps in a noble state because he's one with God. But let everyone take that attitude and the world will change. Not be beaten, but you can take the whole vast world, if they feel themselves slaves, give them the world, they'll want it again tomorrow. And if a man has self-respect, you can give him all the money in the world, and it means nothing. That goes for the individual, it goes for a family, it goes for a race of people, it goes for a nation. Just as our late President Hoover said, the rise and fall of ideas will determine the rise and fall of men, the rise and fall of nations, the rise and fall of communities. So tell me the idea the community entertains about itself, and I'll tell you that community. The earliest gospel is Mark, and the first words you find on the lips of this power, the time is fulfilled, and the kingdom of God is at hand. Repent and believe in the gospel. Now the word repent, as we use it in the world, is not what Scripture means. When we use it here, we mean to feel remorse, regret. That has nothing to do with the word repent. It's the Greek metanoia, a radical but radical change of attitude, a radical change of mind. Can I see an objective, and then everything tells me that, well, I can't realize it? Well, do I have the power to realize the objective? I tell you, we have. We have the power. For what is the deeper meaning of power but effectiveness in achieving one's purpose in life? Well, so I have a purpose. Do I have the power? I tell everyone, yes. You can imagine the end, can't you? Can you imagine what it would be like if it were true? Can you feel what it would be like if it were true? Well, then that's the power. Now, can you be persistent in it? Can you remain faithful to that end as though it were true? Now, I don't care what the objective is. You have the power to achieve it if you know this power is the power of Christ. For all things are possible to him. He's personified in Scripture. Let us go back and see how they first personify him. You'll read it in the 8th chapter of the book of Proverbs, the 22nd verse through to the end, the 36th verse. And these are the words: God possessed me in the beginning of his way, the very first of his acts of old, before he brought forth the universe, before he laid out the foundations of the earth. I was beside him like a little child. I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, delighting in his inhabited world. Now, my sons, listen to me. He who finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who misses me injures himself. All who hate me love death. You'll read these words in the 8th of Proverbs. Here he is personalized as a little child, God's companion in the creation of the world. All who hate me love death. Now, this world is the world of death. So you tell the story to the world, and the majority would rather have the building across the street, or this building, something to them that is secure, than to know, pardon me, of a power. Take the building away, destroy the building, but leave me the power to recreate it. Don't take from me the creative power, but take all the things I create. But the world would rather have the things created than the power to create. And so those who hate me, they love death. They're in love with the whole vast world that decays. For everything that is built today gradually fades. It comes into the world, it waxes, it wanes, and it vanishes. But leave me the power to bring anything into this world, and take from me, if you will, anything that I bring into the world. But don't take from me the creative power, that I may actually create anything in this world. Now, what does he mean by repentance? It means this: it tests the individual's ability to enter into and partake of the nature of the opposite. I see someone and they're behind the 8 ball financially. They have to pay rent, they have to buy clothes, feed themselves, and maybe they have obligations to society. Others to feed, others to clothe. There may be a father, mother. And I meet them and they are not employed. Now, it tests my ability to put them into the state where they are gainfully employed. I bring them before my mind's eye, and I represent them to myself as gainfully employed. And to the degree that I am self-persuaded of the reality of what I'm seeing and hearing and doing, to that degree they become exactly what I am doing, all in my imagination. Well, if tomorrow or in the immediate present they actually conform outwardly to what I am doing inwardly, I have found the creative power. I try it again with another one. I try it with another one. And I keep on trying it. And it works. Well, then I tell it. And ask everyone who will listen to me and believe it to try it. See if you can exercise that same power in you. It's not a different power. There's only one Christ. So all of a sudden you find that this is what the world is talking about. But they put him on the outside and made some little god of him when he is housed in everyone. I'll give you this story. A friend of mine down south, he went to this barber shop. There were 4 barbers. He went to the boss barber first, and after about 3 visits, the barber couldn't take him this day, and he took the 4th one, the last year. He rather liked the way this man cut his hair. He got talking to him, and he realized the man loved barbering. He loved it. That's all my friend needed. You really love it? He said, I just love it. I wouldn't do anything else but cut hair. I just love it. And this is what my friend did. He imagined that man, the head of the shop. Didn't consult him, didn't consult the boss barber, didn't consult anyone. Just this one. He liked him. He imagined that he was the head of not this shop, but a shop. 6 weeks later, the barber decided, the owner, to unload the shop. How he raised the money, my friend never told me, but he bought the shop and moved from the fourth man, the low man on the totem pole, to the boss barber. In the last year, this one so loves it, he came here to the city about 2 months ago. There was some meeting here, a contest among barbers. He brought 2 of his barbers with him. One was committed and couldn't come that day. He brought 2. They took back, out of 5 prizes, they took back 4. He won 2, a first and a second, and 2 of his barbers won 2 seconds. He just entered another contest of the entire region, that is the 7 western states, and he won it, plus $1,000. The big plaque is now on his wall. All because of my friend's use of imagination. This man has a terrific control of this power. He's an advertising agent. About, I would say, the early part of this year, his boss said to him, "This is our best account, and I don't want to lose it." But you know, the industry today is on the skids, and we must do something to pull it up. Well, he sat down, he said, "Now, if imagining creates reality, my only problem would be to face these men who believe themselves so wise and persuade them to let me go all out with my campaign from the premise that it's already an accomplished fact. I can't advertise that this thing is possible. I've got to say it has been tried and proven in my ads." He worked out the entire thing. When these 20 men, all multimillionaires, for this is one of the huge industries of the world, this is an international industry. When he worked the entire thing out and presented it to these 20 men on the board, they thought themselves above all this. They were ethically above all things. Their moral code would not allow it. But my friend persuaded them that this is how a law operates, that imagining creates reality. So if you want something created, leave it to me. I will take your desire, I'll make it something that is already a fact. You voice it. The first quarter of this year, that industry not only arrested the motion down, turned it around, and their profits, not their gross, their profits the first quarter of this year was $75 million more than the first quarter of last year. 75 million more. I'm speaking of a net profit. Now these wise men with their wonderful ethical codes, they allow it. They saw the money in the bank. They saw all these things, and their so-called ethical moral codes went through the window because they saw another principle which they did not know. His competitor, and I saw the letter, his competitor in the advertising field wrote the boss, my friend's boss. He said, "You know, I take my hat off to you. You use the principle that we've always used in our work," which was a darn lie. He never did it at all. He said, "I know exactly what you did." He's trying to fish him out to find out what he's doing. And in this letter, he makes the claim that he actually knew and they've always used it. And no one can work for our concern unless he's aware of this principle and lives by it. We aren't concerned about his religious background. He could be a Catholic, Protestant, Jew, or an atheist. But he has to live by this principle. When I saw that letter, the man was fishing. Just fishing to get the one who really conceived it to come forward and tell him what he did. Well, here is the same one in the barber shop. He goes there every Saturday morning by appointment, and the boss barber waits for him, right on the dot. Every Saturday he is right there for this chap. He loves him, and he took him from the low man on the totem pole and pushed him right up. He realized the man likes cutting hair. That's what he likes. He just loves it. All right, then be the best. If you like it, be the very best in the trade. Tell me what you want. Maybe you want to be a wife. Or some keeping a home. What's wrong with that? My mother never went to work. She just had 10 children and lived at home with her full complement of servants. My sister has never worked, so she lives at home with her servants. My wife worked until I could afford to keep her. Then when I could afford to keep her, then I said, "No, you stop." So she stopped. That's, well, almost 2 years after we got married. 2 years afterwards, I could afford to keep her. But now, from now on, you don't work. And so she hasn't gone back to work. So tell me what you want, and then let me persuade myself that what you really want, you have. To the degree that I am self-persuaded that you have it, you'll get it. If I can't persuade myself, well then, I have failed. But I haven't misspent the energy, because I tried it lovingly. So anytime you use your imagination lovingly on behalf of another, you use it wisely. Even if you didn't succeed in producing the results that you're seeking, you used it wisely. So the power of which I speak is your own wonderful human imagination. That's God. So when I tell you that man is all imagination, and God is man, and exists in us and we in him, the eternal body of man is the imagination, and that is God himself. The divine body, Jesus, and we are his members. For everyone can imagine, therefore all are members of the one body. So this is that one spoken of in the 8th chapter of Proverbs. I was beside him like a little child. Find me and you find life. Miss me and you injure yourself. Hate me and you love death. So the one who finds him is born from above. And unless ye be born from above, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. Repent and believe the story of the gospel. And to repent is simply to challenge you, to test you. Can you take a man from the lowest point in the barber shop and make him the boss? Can you represent him to yourself as one who really is in charge, who loves it, and you love him? Well, then try it. So he loved him, brought him into his mind's eye as one that really was important in his life, and the man suddenly rose, to the highest place in his shop. And now in the entire western area, he has won all the prizes. And this one, in his advertising agency, he can write his own ticket today. The boss said to him, what do you want? The boss gives him, well, I would say 3-4 times a year, a huge, big, unsolicited bonus check. He wants to keep him. My friend has no desire to quit, but the boss is so eager to hold him. There's one bonus after the other. And my friend, all right, he'll take it. Why shouldn't he? So I ask everyone here to try it. Don't just listen to it and not try it. You are the operant power. It doesn't operate itself. And so when I know what I should do, well, then do it. Go to sleep tonight, all right. How am I sleeping? In what state of consciousness am I sleeping? As someone that is unwanted? Well, then I rise tomorrow to find myself unwanted. Ignore the facts of life and assume that you are wanted. Ignore the facts of life and assume that you are affluent. And see how things work in your world. It all come your way. You are creating out of a power that is infinite. And you don't need any contacts in the world. You don't need to know the right people or anything else in the world. All you need to know is Christ. And Christ is your own wonderful human imagination. What else do you need to know but Christ? So you try it tonight. Try it with anything in this world. The unmarried, if you desire to be married, what symbol in the world would imply that you are married? A little band in this Western world, a little band around this finger. Not around any other finger, around this finger. It doesn't have to be the biggest aspidastra in the world. Just a plain little gold ring. If you wore it there, it would imply you're married. Sleep tonight as though you wore one. Don't put your physical thumb on it. Put your imaginary thumb on it. And feel it in your imagination. You can do it. Feel a ball. Can you feel it? Then feel a piece of silk. Feel this, one after the other. Can you discriminate between all these different sensations? If you can discriminate between this and a tennis ball and a baseball, a piece of silk, then you can't discriminate between nothings. They must exist, though unseen by your eyes, they still must exist. So if I can discriminate between these unseen objects, these objects, though unseen, must be real. Well, now take that and put it there. But feel when you wear it that you are proud of the one who put it there. You don't have to see what he looks like. When it's put there, you'll be proud of his name, to bear it, and you'll be proud of him. Just put it there. You know how I know that? My wife did it. She did it. Actually, she did it. One day she was in the presence of a so-called sensitive. And this one said to her, "Why did you take off your wedding ring?" She said, "I am not married." "Oh," she said, "don't fool me. You took off your wedding ring." She said, "But I'm not married." She said, "I'll even tell you his name." And she started off with Neville. She didn't quite get it, but she was coming very, very close to it. She was actually sensing what my wife in consciousness was feeling. When I first met her, I wanted her the very first day I knew her. I wanted to marry her. But I was entangled. Was I entangled? But by this law, I disentangle myself. Without hurting anyone, I disengage myself from all these complexities so that I could actually legitimately say, "Will you marry me?" But in the meanwhile, she was wearing the ring. I hadn't yet put it there, but she allowed me to put it there and slept as though I had put it there. So I tell you, unmarried ladies, if you desire to be married, maybe you don't. If you do, that's the way to do it. And he'll come out of the nowhere. You don't have to go and buy anyone or try to meet the right people. Usually when you try to meet the right one, he's always the wrong one. So don't go searching. Those who go searching for love only make manifest their own lovelessness. And the loveless never find love. Only the loving find love, and they never have to seek for it. So you fall in love, you don't have to seek for it. You draw them. They come to you. So here, this is the power of which I speak. The power of the universe, the power that created and sustains the universe, is resident in you as your own wonderful human imagination. That's God. Don't forget it. I know it's difficult when man has been trained to believe in an external God. And he goes to church and gets on his knees and he prays to an external God. And he goes home at night, maybe he does say his prayers, and he gets down on his knees and he prays to an external God. All right, maybe that's a nice thing for someone to do. But I tell you, he isn't out there at all. You won't be criticized for it, but he's within you. Very personal, may I tell you. He is very, very personal. And within you. Man creates unwittingly just as well as he does wittingly. But in this world of ours, we should learn to create consciously. But I can't deny that the so-called unconscious creation is just as effective. We walk the earth and we see a headline, we don't know the people involved, and we react. That reaction, felt intensely, was a creative act on our part. And we don't know the people at all. And so, if you do it wittingly or unwittingly, it's still creative. Therefore, become aware of what you're doing. Or I can say to everyone, become more and more aware, so that at all times you are selective. You and I will not go into a store and say, "Give me a tie." Be selective. I said, "Don't you bring me 3 ties. Let me see some ties. 50 ties, 100 ties." And I pick up 1. Maybe I pick up 2. I don't go in and say, "Give me a suit. Let me see some suit lengths." And from maybe a dozen or more, I select 1. Texture, color, what I think I need in my wardrobe to augment the wardrobe. So I pick it out. And then he makes it for me. So I don't let him tell me what I should want.
So neither one is more effective than the other?
No, just effective. All day long people are reaping the most horrible thing in the world, and it all is what they're planted unwittingly. They sit down in New York City, they buy the little paper, the news. From beginning to end is the biggest paper in our country. It has a daily circulation of over 2.5 million. I think the Sunday circulation is about 5 million. It's a little tabloid, and not one word in it is anything but negative. Who murdered whom, who is raping whom, who's living with whose wife, and all this is all in and they love it. And of course their little lives are drab anyway, so it's sort of vicarious. And they fatten themselves with all this nonsense as they go to their job. 1 solid hour they're reading it. Well, when things happen in their world and continue to happen of an unnatural, abnormal manner, they don't realize they're doing it. The whole thing is done by them. They're fattening on it. No discrimination at all. And there are people who go into it's like going into the restaurant and say, "What does the chef want to get rid of today?"
same thing. And he said, "Oh, we have too much of the stew. We had it for 4 days. Can't sell it, and that's what we want to unload. Call it by a different name today and unload it." Well, I don't go for that. Give me the menu. A friend of mine taught me this lesson once. We went into a restaurant, and the waiter was very, very careless, and he spilled a little of the soup. And my friend called him over. He said, "Tell me, is this charity?" Well, the waiter was flabbergasted. He said, "I'm asking a very simple question. Is this charity?" And he said, "What do you mean, sir?" He said, "Do I pay for it?" He said, "Why, certainly, sir." He said, "Take it back and bring me a nice, clean plate and unspilled soup." The man took it back and brought him a nice, clean plate and unspilled soup. If it's charity, leave it here. I can't complain. But if I'm paying for it, you take it back. Well, that is a lesson we should all learn. Too many careless things go on, and no one jacks them up.
I want to be successful, a man will say. Or the girl will say, "Well, I want to be happily married. I want him to be successful. And I want to live graciously in my world." Well, that's an end. Go to the end. View the world from that end. Don't think of it. If you think of it, you're not in it. I must actually occupy the end. Go to the end and view the world from that end. Now act in it. How would it be if it were true? What would the feeling be like if it were true? For this is simply taking the end and drenching it in feeling. I assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and I drench myself with that feeling. Then I open my eyes, and the world denies it. It doesn't really matter. Let me remain faithful to that end, and then it will come just as suddenly. But strangely enough, I'm going to pass through, it may be not a severe tribulation, but I'll pass through certain trials, certain heartbreaks, certain delays that I can't quite understand. But these, when I reach the end, and the end comes suddenly upon me, and the whole thing is fulfilled, I will see it was all in order. Everything was in order. My own disappointments in my world led up to whatever I am doing today. When the teacher in my school, I could ill afford the $500 that my father gave me to go to this small school in New York City. And she made me the goat. She called me out before an audience of about 40 students, and she said, "Now listen to him speak. He will never earn a living using his voice." She should not have done that, but she did it. But she didn't know the kind of person that she was talking about. Instead of going down into the grave and burying my head in shame, I was determined that I would actually disprove her. It did something to me when she said to me, "You will never earn," to the class, using me as the guinea pig to show them what not to do. And so she said I spoke with a guttural voice, and I spoke with this very heavy accent, and I will never use my voice to earn a living. Well, I do not know what the others are doing. I haven't heard of them. And there's not a thing wrong in selling shirts for Macy's. You use your voice there too. And I dare say most of them wound up selling groceries or something. I met one of them, and he was selling groceries at Macy's. And he said to me, "Neville, what do you do?" So I said, "I talk on the Bible." "You talk on the Bible? Or are you a minister?" I said, "No, I'm a minister. I simply talk on the Bible, from having experienced the Bible. But I do not know what they do, if they're still in this world. But I don't think one of them ever earned a living using his voice, unless he was selling groceries, as this one chap I know, he sold groceries. We all went to this school, and this teacher simply singled me out to make some little, exhibition of what I should not be doing in class. But I went home, and I was so annoyed that I had lost my father's $500 or $600 that he gave me for the 6 months course, that I was determined that she was false, that she was wrong. So I went to the end. I went to the end and actually felt that I was facing an audience, and unembarrassed, and I could talk and talk and talk forever without notes. No notes. And so, class came to an end, and I left. She was convinced, and maybe they were convinced. It doesn't matter what they do, it's what I do. So, others may be convinced, it doesn't really matter. The whole vast world is yourself pushed out. Maybe I needed that jolt at that moment in time. And so I went through the different tribulations, and finally I found myself doing what I always wanted to do, to tell the story as it happened to me in my vision. I was having all these visions, and they were related, and yet, how to do it? So the first night I started, I think 6 people came. I paid $3 for the hall, and they all came. I sat down. I wore a tux for the occasion. And I sat down and spoke for 10 minutes and dried up. Then I asked them to ask me questions. So they did, very graciously. They're all friends. Sent out 50 penny postcards. In those days, you could send a card for a penny. Sent out 50 and 6 came. And out of, well, sympathy, each gave a $1 bill. So at least I paid $3 for the room, and I made $3. And that was my beginning. And then it grew from 3 to 10 to 20. And one night, when I had about 50, a man in the building saw me growing and growing and growing, and he thought he'd put a stop to it. And he was going to one of these New Thought conventions in Washington, D.C. And so he asked me to take his platform. And he had a very large audience of about 500. He thought that would throw me. And so I accepted his generous offer. I learned afterward his purpose was to simply get me out of the place. He thought I would simply make a monkey of myself before a vast audience who were trained differently. Unfortunately for him, and fortunately for me, the next time I spoke, my room couldn't take them. I had to move several times in 6 months, and then I moved to an old church at track 1100. So you see, he thought he was going to hurt me. As Scripture teaches, you meant it evil. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. So I got his audience. And then, about 3 years later, for some little infraction of the laws of New York City, they put him away for a couple of years. And when he came out, he asked me if I would speak for him, and I said yes, without 1 penny. I will willingly speak for him, because no one else would speak for him. They cut him off completely and said, no, you don't realize how good you were to me. And so I will speak for you. And I went up and I spoke for him without taking 1 penny. And then he couldn't get going again. And then he and his secretary got into his car, turned on the ignition, closed up all things, and called it a day. So you see, you go through these things, and at moments they seem to be against you, and they're all for you, if you remain faithful to the end. So let us be imitators of God as their children. So then we are told, I was not ungrateful. I was not, I would say, forgetful of the divine image. I remain faithful to it. If I remain faithful to it, let anything happen, and then say within yourself, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. I can go back in my own family, when people tried to take from my father little equity that he had in the business. And we thought the world came to an end on that day, for he had a large family, and how to feed them, how to support them. 10 children, your wife, yourself, your mother-in-law, and the few servants that we had. And no one would come to see him because they weren't quite sure but what the accusation might be true. And that, on reflection, was the turning point in the family's fortunes. So from being a minor partner, having a very small equity in the business, he turned around without partners and then transcended the wildest dream of the family. And that was the turning point. He kept his vision. He knew he hadn't done a thing that was wrong, and he kept his vision concerning what he wanted in life and what he wanted for the family. So if you have a vision, and by vision I mean a daydream, what would you like to be in this world? Do you know it? Just what would you like to be? How would you like things to be in your world? Well, that's a vision. Well, now, remain faithful to it. Tomorrow you may be given a severe blow, and you may interpret that as being set back. Time will prove it was a turning point in your fortunes. Everything will add up towards the fulfillment of your dream if you remain faithful to that vision. It's all in your own wonderful human imagination. That's God. God actually became as I am, as you are, that you may be as he is. And he takes upon himself all the weaknesses of man. For we say, well, God doesn't suffer. Well, now I ask you a question. If you're in pain, are you in pain? And you will say to me, yes, I am. Well, that's his name. God's name, he has no other name. That's who he is. So you say, I am in pain. I am embarrassed. I am unwanted. That's God's name. He is doing all the suffering because he goes through life with you, as you, until one day he reveals that he's you. It is God and God alone playing all the parts in the world. There's nothing but God. If God did not become as I am, I couldn't breathe. He is my breath. But he doesn't limit me to my wishes. He doesn't limit me to my outlook on life. He plays all the parts. He waits on me just as quickly and as indifferently when the will in me is evil as when it is good. And therefore, he subjects himself to all the things in my world. God is like pure imagining in you, in me, in every being in the world. So you imagine, all right, that's God. And he waits on us because we imagine this, that, and the other. Now you know this, go to the end, a noble end, a successful end in your world. All right, having seen it clearly in your mind's eye, what would the feeling be like if it were true? Drench yourself in that feeling. Now, tomorrow you may be disappointed. All right, don't expect it tomorrow. It may come tomorrow. When it comes, it's going to come suddenly and unexpectedly. But remain faithful to the end. And all the little things that will happen in your world that will seem to deny it, they're adding up to it. Everything will add up towards that. I'm telling you from my own experience. There's nothing but God in the world. He's playing all the parts. The most horrible part and the most noble part. He's playing all the parts. And no one is greater than you are because no one is greater than God. Let no one pull any rank on you. No one is greater than God. You have a background that goes back to God. It's not a physical background. You're not a horse. If I'm breeding horses, I want to know their background. But you are not a horse. You're not breeding pigs. You're not breeding sheep. You are simply the unfolding of God. And there is nothing but God. New ideas require many reiterations and restatements before they become part of the generally accepted currency of thought. The idea that I've been trying to get over since I started back in 1938 is still new. It comes as a shock to anyone who hears it. And even after you've heard it for years and years and think you're living by it, I've discovered that one is not really living by it. It has not yet become a part of their thinking. And it is that imagining creates reality. I say this because I identify imagining with God in action. To me, man is all imagination, and God is man, and exists in us and we in him. The eternal body of man is the imagination, and that is God himself. If by God I mean the creator of the universe, the maker and the master of the whole vast universe, and I identify that creator with the human imagination, then man should be more careful as to what he is imagining. So I can give lip service to the statement, imagining creates reality. And yet if I'm observant in the course of a day, if I observe what I'm imagining, I would find unnumbered moments in my life, in 124 hours, or rather, the waking 18, where I am imagining things I do not wish to experience. If I really believed that imagining creates reality, I would be more careful, more concerned about what I'm imagining. So I will give it lip service and say imagining creates reality and go blindly on imagining anything other than what I want to create, beginning with the morning paper and reacting to things that you do not know, whether they be true. They could be planted by some press agent, planted by some lobbyist. You do not know. And here we react as we read, and then we go through the life in just 24 hours and find that most of the 24 hours we spend imagining what we do not wish to experience. If man would only look upon the world as a world of appearance, behind which the reality of imagining lay, he would find the truth. He would find God. Now there's a story told in the 17th chapter of the book of Acts. Now it's a story. Whether it was historically true or not, it doesn't really matter. It's trying to push a point to the fore. It is said that the men of Athens spent all day in the marketplace looking for a new idea, either telling one or hearing one. Then came upon the scene one called Paul, and they wondered, what has this babbler to say? What is his new idea? And he told them the idea of Jesus and the resurrection. And we are told the Epicureans and the Stoic philosophers mocked him and scoffed at him. Others said, we will hear more about this later. And he said to them, and this is all ironical, if you read it carefully, he said, O men of Athens, I see in every way you are very religious. For as I passed by, I observed the objects of your worship. Now, right away, that's irony. The objects of their worship. Then he said, I noticed this inscription over an altar, to an unknown God. What you therefore worship, unknown, I declare to you. Then he tells them of the only God, the God that created everything, and he's not a God afar off. He is indwelling, he is within every single being in the world, the God of the universe. Not made with hands. You wouldn't find him in a temple, in a church, in a cathedral, or the little objects of your worship that you make of man with your own hands and then worship him and call him Apollo. But here the God that I speak of is within everyone. That's the God of whom I speak. That's the God that raises from the dead. Well, they laughed and they mocked him. Then we are told he went on from Athens to Corinth. What he performed there, no one knows. Whether Athens ever took him up, because they were the wise men. They were called the very learned men of the day. We have them today too. They scoff at anything that is not part of their great voluminous works. But I am telling you, if, as Paul said to the Athenians, if you would only feel after him, you would find him. If you would feel after him, you would find him. Find what? Find the God of the universe. For he gave us not the spirit of the world, but the spirit of himself. That spirit of himself in man is man's own wonderful human imagination. When you say, I am, that's God. The one and only God, and there is no other God. Therefore he is in every man, every woman, every child born of woman. It is the God in that being that allows that being to breathe, to live, to experience what we call life in this world. That is the immortal you. So the eternal body of man is the imagination. And that is God himself. The one we speak of in the New Testament as Jesus. That is God. Well, where is it? Something on the outside? No. He is in you. When you say, I am, that's Jesus. Now, the world is taught differently. Therefore, it comes as a shock when they hear it. They don't want to hear it. They will listen if they could simply improve their life in this world, get more money, do things that they want to do, and still hold on to this little object on the outside. So he spoke, I observe the objects of your worship. Well, man does that with what they call Jesus. They take their human hands, they make a mold of something, they call it Jesus, put it on a piece of wood, or put it on something else, stick it on the wall, and then cross themselves for good luck. There is the object of their worship, something they made themselves. The maker is greater than the thing made. No matter how wonderful it's made, certainly the artist is greater than his work. And so we make all these things and put it on the outside and then bow before it and worship. I tell you, your own wonderful human imagination is God. That's God. Now, if I would only observe this and keep it in mind, I should be able to put Paul to the test. He said, feel after him, and you'll find him. Blake said, imagination is spiritual sensation. Spiritual sensation. But how would I feel after him and find him? Well, first of all, he does all things, good, bad, or indifferent. And he waits on me just as indifferently and as swiftly when the will in me is evil as when it is good. Because he is a creative power. He kills, he makes alive. He wounds, he heals. All things are done by the one creative power. There isn't another God who is evil and one that is good, one that is altogether loving and one that is altogether hating. No. Only one power. And that power is the human imagination. So, how will I then feel after him? What would the feeling be like if it were true? What true? That I am the man that I would like to be. What would the feeling be like? Test it. For all things are made by him. And without him was not anything made that was made. Well, now, if I dare to assume that I am now the man that I want to be, and I persist in that assumption, watching my mind morning, noon, and night, that anything that I find myself dwelling upon that is in conflict with that assumption, I ignore it. I put it aside. I will be faithful to this divine vision, the vision of myself. So anytime I catch myself daring to feel less than the thing that I'm feeling or trying to externalize in my world, I simply stop it and go back to that assumption that I am the man that I want to be. If I persist in it and it becomes a fact, then I have found him. I don't observe imagining as I do objects in space. I am the reality that is called imagining. So you don't see God because God is spirit, but you see the results of his activity in you. He is active in you as you imagine. You're completely free to imagine good, bad, or indifferent. So you simply select what you want to imagine. Would you like to be, and you name it. Well, you say, but I don't have the background for it. I do not have any of the qualifications for it. It doesn't really matter. If imagining creates reality, you do not need the qualifications that the world thinks you need. All you need to do is simply to boldly assume that you are the man, the woman that you would like to be. And if it proves itself in performance, then you have found him. So Paul said to the Athenians, feel after him and you'll find him. Well, I have seen it numberless times in my 34 years of teaching. I started back in February of 1938. And here I am, this is February of 1972, and I'm yet to see it fail. If we, the operant power, applies it. It doesn't apply itself. We are the operant power. For in man is God, and God is man's own wonderful human imagination. So if I dare to assume that I am the one that I would like to be, well, that's God who's doing it. So how will I turn then to God tonight? Say, a half dozen people asked of me tonight. It takes no time. They voiced their request. There's a statement made in the book of John, the epistle of John. If we know that he hears us in whatever we ask of him, we know that we have already obtained the request made of him. Well, when they're talking to me, they say, I would like so-and-so. Instantly it comes within the frame of my golden rule. It's something I would like myself. If I were in their present state of consciousness, I would like that. It doesn't violate my rule. It doesn't injure someone. It doesn't take from anyone. Well now, did I hear it? I heard it. Well, if I and my Father are one, well then my Father heard it. I do not know the means that will be employed to bring it to pass, but I can't deny that I heard it. If I heard it and I and my Father are one, well, can I not now say to my inner being, thank you, Father? You heard it, because I heard it. Well, if we know that he hears all that we ask of him, then we know we have already obtained the request made of him. So as to say to me, I would like so-and-so. Well then, I heard it. I do not know, as a man called Neville, how it's going to happen. I do not know. I'm not going to suggest what they do or what they should do. I only know that I heard it, and if I heard it, my Father heard it, because he and I are one. He is my own wonderful human imagination. So I could actually say within myself as though we were two. Thank you. You heard it, because I heard it. And then allow the depth of my own being to devise the means necessary to bring it to pass. And then I am not responsible from that moment on. I do not call them up and say, did it happen? I do not get in touch with them and write them and say, tell me, how are things coming? It's not my concern. I did what was asked of me. And all that was asked of me was to hear, use my imagination lovingly on their behalf. Well, I did it. In the twinkle of an eye. You don't have to go into some sweat to do it. I don't have to go to some church and do it, go to some synagogue and do it, or some so-called holy place. Wherever I stand should be holy, because the Father is within me. And where can you go to a more holy place than where God is? If I know God is my own wonderful human imagination, then where can I go that could be more holy than wherever I am, no matter where it is? So the request is made, I heard it, and then having heard it, I give thanks to the being within me who has the means, the wisdom, and the power to externalize it. Knowing that the entire outside world, that all objective reality is solely produced through imagining. What is now proven in the world was once only imagined. Try to deny that. Try to deny it. There isn't a thing in this world that you can say that's real, that was not first only imagined. So I say to everyone here, take the statement, feel after him, and you'll find him. He didn't say you may find him. Feel after him, and you'll find him. But these ideas are so new, and yet they aren't new. They go back into the Old Testament. Here we find the word for imagination used as the word potter. Well, if you say the word potter, go down to the potter's house, and I let you hear my word. So I went down to the potter's house, and there he was working at his wheel, and the vessel in his hand was spoiled. So he reworked it into another vessel, as it seemed good to the potter to do. If you read it in the form of the story in which it is told in the 18th chapter of Jeremiah, you will think of a man with clay in his hands, at his wheel, pumping away, making a vessel, making some kind of a, well, could be anything, a plate. That's not it. The word potter means imagination. It's like saying to you, go into your own imagination and see what you're doing with a friend. You just heard that he was in need. Are you now going to finish that and take him now into a greater need? Or are you going to rework it into another vessel as it seemed good to you to do? You don't go to some potter's house. Go down to the potter's house, and there I will let you hear my word. So I went down to the potter's house, and there he was, working at his wheel. And the vessel in his hand was spoiled. He didn't throw it away and discard it. He reworked it into another vessel, as it seemed good to him to do. So a man, a friend of ours, he's unemployed. All right, so he's unemployed, and he doesn't have the qualifications for a better job, and there is no job at the moment for what he has. So what? I will rework it. I will hear him tell me that he has the most marvelous job, and he's gainfully employed. What the job is, I do not know, but I can say to myself, well, if I heard it, surely the depth of my own being heard it. And so I can say, thank you. Having reworked him in my own mind's eye into an entirely different being, the same friend, but not one unemployed, he is now gainfully employed. So feel it. If I can feel this state, I'm finding God. For God is spirit. And may I tell you, and by spirit I do not mean some intangible thing. It actually is the human form divine. When I speak of the human imagination, it is a form. It's a reality. It is the divine form. So the eternal body of man is the human imagination. And that is God himself. And there is no other God. He said, I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. I do all things, and none can deliver out of my hands. This is Scripture. But man, when he hears the word God, he thinks of something out in space. Where, he doesn't quite know, but something in space. If the word God in any way conjures within you something that is other than your own wonderful human imagination, you've got the wrong God. When I go to bed, I must assume that I am already in New York. Well, how would I know that I am there? If I am all imagination, I must be wherever I am in imagination. Well, if I am in imagination in New York, now think of the world. Think of California. Southern California, where you place the body. Well, do you see it on the bed as you're thinking? Well, then you're not in New York. Do you see it 3,000 miles away to the west of you? Well, then you are in New York. But were you in New York, you would see the body in your mind's eye 3,000 miles away in Los Angeles. And you'd be thinking from New York rather than thinking of New York. So the whole thing is simply finding out this fantastic power, creative power in man, and how it operates. For there is no problem in the world comparable to this problem of solving the mystery of imagining. For supreme power and supreme wisdom and supreme delight is in store for the one who conquers this mystery. So, whether you be in jail, all right, so you're in jail, and you dare to assume that you're free. You aren't going to break through the doors and be picked up and be sent to a longer term. You simply assume that you're free. Who today on death row? Many of them prayed that their sons would not be put in the chamber. And they believe their prayers. And so the Supreme Court brings in a verdict, no more killing of men because they kill someone. Whether you approve or disapprove, that's not the point. All things are possible in God's will. All things. So I'm not going to pass any opinion whether this thing is right or wrong. I'm not going to be involved emotionally as to whether they did the right thing or the wrong thing. I only know from personal experience, if I had a son there, I want him free. If he were there, he's not there, but if he was there, I want him free. Regardless of what he did. As one who loves his son, I want him free. But I am not going to pass any opinion or any judgment concerning the Supreme Court's decision. The thing is, all things are possible. You tell me what you want, and if it comes within the framework of what I call the golden rule, which is simply doing unto others as you would have others do unto you. If it fits that frame, well then, you are on the right course. Well then, you can't do it physically, no. You don't have the power or the wisdom to do it. But there's something in you which is your essential being. It can do it. It knows exactly how to do it. Can you trust him? Can you trust this being within you to have heard what you heard? I heard it on this level, the request made. And if I heard it on this level, certainly the depth of my own being heard it. And on that depth, he has ways and means I do not have on this level. Therefore, I'm not concerned as to how it's going to work. I only know it will work. By simply assuming that I am already the one I want to be. And if I dare to assume it and remain faithful to it, then it becomes a fact. So imagining, plus this kind of faith in God, and God is your own wonderful human imagination. So faith in God is the way to success. You imagine it as though it were true, and then you walk your way, not knowing how it's going to become true. But it will become true. I invite you to test it. Just try it. Cost you nothing. And if I take from you your gods, as Paul took from the Athenians their gods, then it's a blessing. If you can lose your God, it's a good thing, because the real God you can't lose. And you can never lose being. You can never lose the sense of I am. You can lose everything else, but you can never cease to be aware that you are. That's God. And so if I can't take that from you, well then I can't take the real God from you. But if I can take any other thing from you, and you worship it, you have the false God. And I did you a service in taking anything but the reality, because I can't take the reality from you. So all outer services and ceremonies, they mean nothing. Nothing. Go about your Father's business, which is yourself, doing noble things in this world, imagining the best, and it will come to pass. That's why I say, if it seems that I reiterate and restate night after night after night, it's essential. Because if you are perfectly honest with yourself this day, and you observe what you are imagining in the course of one day, you'll be ashamed of what you imagine. And yet you are imagining things you do not want to happen. And yet you will give lip service to the statement, imagining creates reality. And then one moment later, a friend of mine up in San Francisco, she was a friend of a mutual friend, and they didn't get on very well, only at moments. One night, riding with her, we went down, maybe 75 miles down the peninsula for a dinner. Lovely dinner, and all the way back, this very, very heavy fog could hardly see a few yards before you. And she was talking of this friend of mine, who she claimed to be a friend of hers. And she would rant against this woman, so and so and so. I wouldn't even print it. You couldn't print it. It burned the page. And then at the end of her statement, she would say, God bless her soul. She kept up the entire 75 miles, blasting this woman, and then she would qualify the whole thing, and it was all forgiven. God bless her soul. So, she is still here. The other one has gone from this little section of time. And she's still playing the same part, using her imagination in every way she doesn't want in this world. And things went from bad to worse in her world. And they're still that way. And she can't for one moment believe she is the cause of the phenomena of her life. Oh no, she can't for one moment. And yet I had one long 75-mile drive with her, where it would take a whole lifetime to reap that harvest. But she said in that long drive from dinner back home. So man has a very weak memory, and he doesn't remember when he did these things. But there's a depth in man who does not forget. We are warned in Galatians, be not deceived. God is not mocked. As a man sows, so shall he reap. Then we are told by the poet, you see yonder fields, the sesamum was sesamum, and the corn was corn. The darkness and the silence knew, and so is a man's fate born. So you don't recognize your own harvest, but it couldn't make a mistake. Everything is after the identical seed. You plant a seed. What seed was it? Well, you've forgotten what it was. Well, wait till the tree comes up. You'll know. Because it can't be other than what was planted. If I plant an oak, well then, the oak is going to spring up into the oak tree. If I plant that sort of an acorn, that's going to be the oak tree. But if I plant something else, well then wait. If I've forgotten what I planted, wait. The harvest will show me. And man denies his own harvest. So I'm telling you that your own wonderful human imagination is God. It's the God of Scripture, the only God. Whether in the Old Testament you call him the Lord, or call him Jehovah, or call him God, or in the New Testament you call him Jesus, it's the same thing. This is the creative power in man, and that creative power in man is man's own wonderful human imagination. Why repeat unnumbered stories that I've told you in the past? I could start with new ones, but what? You know the technique. And the technique is simple. If all things are created out of man's human imagination, well then let him start imagining what he wants to be. And if he does, success will follow him. But in the meanwhile, try to prune the plant. Because when you hear for the first time that your imagination is God, it's an awful shock. Because as the poet said, behold this vine, I found it a wild tree, whose wanton strength had swollen into irregular twigs. But I pruned the plant, and then it grew temperate in its vain expense of useless leaves, and knotted, as you see, into these clean, full clusters, to repay the hand that wisely wounded it. So when you first find that the vine spoken of in the Bible, I am the vine of eternity, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. And you discover, well, that vine is my imagination. For then the whole thing went into leaves, useless leaves and branches. It was not producing grapes. Then I start to prune the tree by observing what I'm imagining in the course of 24 hours. It becomes a habit. Then the next day, I do a little bit better. The third day, better still. By the end of a week, I am in the habit now of watching what I'm imagining. And don't wait, instantly prune it. Stop it. Stop imagining. Don't indulge yourself. I have heard people say to me, but just one more second. It's such a pleasant thing to cut him off. And so in his mind's eye, he is cutting off someone, all in his imagination, knowing he's going to reap the fruit of it. Now, if you know that, you aren't going to simply spend an extra 5 seconds of precious time in finishing that emotion. Stop that emotion and get on a new trend. And then you prune the plant. And finally that plant's going to reward you with clean, full clusters because you wisely wounded it. And then you keep that vine going, and the vine will pay enormous dividends. I know from experience. When you go to bed at night, let your last thought be something noble, something wonderful, that you are now, or those you love are now, what you would like to be, and drop off into the deep in that state. and make it a habit. As we are told, you plant a seed, and then the seed becomes an act, and the act becomes a habit, and the habit becomes a character. So if I seem to repeat myself, it's because I have to. Because if anyone here tonight could honestly tell me that in the course of 24 hours they have observed what they were imagining and had not a thing to find fault with, well, I would like to hear that, and I will not call you a liar because I'm not here to judge. But it would be a marvelous thing if you could tell me that. But I know that all of us are victims of habit, and we get into the habit of this internal conversations that are not pleasant. And we think that no one observes, no one sees. So as we are told in the book of Ezekiel, he said, Son of man, go down and see what the elders of the house of Israel are doing. So I went down to the house to observe the elders of the house of Israel. And there they were, each in his own room, carving on the wall. What wall? The wall of your own interior, the wall of this cow. And they're making abominable things. And they say, well, no one sees us. The Lord has forgotten us. They thought because they did it in the silence that no one knows, when the only reality is their own wonderful human imagination. And that is fully aware of what man is doing, and rewards man, good, bad, or indifferent, with his imaginal act. Now, no one can tell me that you could not tonight start to become, if you want to be prosperous, that's a relative term. What you mean by prosperous would not be what another means by it, but what you, and just take yourself, what would it feel like if it were true? Just what would it feel like? Now, you want to objectify something entirely different from what you have so far. Well, now, change the imaginal act. To attempt to change circumstances before I change the imaginal activity is to struggle against the very nature of things. I can't do it, because my imaginal activity is producing the objective realities. And I can't change that objective fact until I change what is causing it. And the cause is an unseen imaginal activity. As we are told, he brings things that are not seen and calls them as though they were seen, and they become seen. Things that are now seen were made out of things that do not appear. That's what we are told in the book of Hebrews. What you now see, it was made out of things that do not appear. Well, if that is a fact, and Scripture has had it now for centuries and centuries as fact, well then, put it to the test. Challenge, yes, challenge the Scripture. As you're taught in Scripture to challenge it. Do you not realize that Jesus Christ is in you? Examine yourselves and see whether you're holding to the faith. Well, test him. Test him and see. If he is in me and he does all things, I'm going to test him. Well, I've tested him over and over and over and found him faithful. I dared at moments in my life to assume that I had what reason told me I did not, and my senses denied it, but I dared to assume that I had it. And it happened. It came out of the nowhere. It happened. So I taught that principle to others. They applied it, and it happened. But strangely enough, after someone becomes a little bit better off than they were, they reflect upon it, and because it always happens in a perfectly normal, natural manner, they say, oh, well, it would have happened anyway. And then they go sound asleep again. You can give someone a sedative, and you try to awaken them. And for a moment, they're alert, seemingly alert. And while you're talking to them, they're sound asleep again. That's humanity. They're dreaming this dream of life, and they see the fruit of what they've imagined and deny that their imagination produced it. So they go sound asleep again, back upon the negative state. But I'm asking you who come here and persist in coming to observe what you are doing in the course of 24 hours. You're not alert 24 hours, but take, say, 16 hours. If you give 8 hours to sleep, well, take 16 hours and try to observe what you are imagining. And if you, perchance you catch yourself imagining what you do not wish to experience, stop it. Stop it right there and then, and don't give it an extra second. It may be you're in the midst of an emotion and you'd like to complete the emotion and tell him off completely. Don't. Stop it. So I'm telling you, your own wonderful human imagination is God. There is no other God. If you think there's another God, then you've got two gods. And you start with two, you're going to have four. And four is going to give you 8. And 8, 16. And then you have millions of gods. There's only one God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And that God is I am. That's his name forever and forever and forever. And when you say I am, you're actually announcing the fact that you are imagining. That is imagination. That's God. And it's the human imagination, and it is the eternal body of the Savior. And the only Savior is the Lord God. I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. And besides me there is no Savior. So the Jesus of the new is the Lord God of the old. And where is he? In man. He gave us not the spirit of this world, he gave us the spirit of himself. And that spirit of himself is in man as man's own wonderful human imagination. In this world, you and I can create states. But the spiritual states are eternal. We create a state here, it's not eternal. We create a state to deliver individuals forevermore. I create a state, somebody asks me, will you hear that I am, and they name what they would like to be. All right? So that I must create the state, knowing that he is now in a state that he dislikes. I must distinguish between the being and the state that he is in. So I see him unemployed. All right? So he's unemployed. And he wants to be gainfully employed. There's nothing wrong in that. So I represent him to myself as one who is gainfully employed, who has more than he's ever had before, to the degree that I am self-persuaded that he is what I have now imagined him to be. To that degree, he will actually become it. I move him out of one state into another. But that state into which he fell remains for anyone to fall into it. And all can fall into it at the same time, for that matter. He's not the only occupant of the state of being unemployed. There could be millions being unemployed. And there could be millions who desire to be out of it. Many who are unemployed have no desire to be out of it. They prefer to be on welfare. That's their desire. Perfectly all right. But if someone desires to be gainfully employed and to leave the state of being unemployed, you and I can create that state. Well, how do I create the state? By using my imagination. Imagination is not a state. It's the human existence himself. You are all imagination. And God is all imagination. You are God. And God is actually within you as your own wonderful human imagination. Now, these permanent states of the soul, these spiritual states, they remain. You and I pass through them towards our own redemption. But in the interval, we meet a friend, and the friend is in need of help. And the help is to move him out of the state. I can give you money, but as Peter said, silver and gold have I not for thee, but such as I have give I unto thee. And he creates a state, and takes the man from being a beggar, who's always begging on the corner, and puts him into a state where he jumps up with joy. He's now employed, not begging for money. So he didn't give him coins, he simply gave him a new state of consciousness. So I take you as an individual. I represent you to myself as the one that you would like to be. The one that I, if I were in your state, would like to be. I make it fit within what is known as the golden rule. I do unto others as I would have them do unto me. If I were in that state, would I like to be in some better state? Certainly. Well then, do it to another. And so if he asks it of you, you simply represent him to yourself as being gainfully employed, or if he is unwell, as being well, or if he is not, if he wants to be married and he can't find the proper mate, then in your mind's eye you assume that he has found the proper mate. Whatever it is that is a normal, natural request that is not in conflict with your own moral, ethical code. And you create a state. This state, then you lift your individual into that state. Well, how do I do it? I carry on a conversation mentally with that friend from the basis that he is in that state. He tells me how happy he is with his new job and how much he is making. I see him in my mind's eye radiant. Well, then, am I self-persuaded that this imaginal act is a fact? Do I really believe in the reality of what I've done? Do I believe that imagining creates reality? I do. Well then, to the degree that I am self-persuaded, he becomes the embodiment of what I've imagined him to be. These are states. So man must distinguish between the individual and the state that he is in. So Blake said, I do not consider the just or the wicked to be in a supreme state, but to be every one of them states of the sleep into which the soul may fall in its deadly dreams of good and evil, when it left paradise following the serpent of generation. So we came down to experience death, for this is a world of death, where everything appears, it waxes, it wanes, and it disappears. So everything dies in this world. No matter how long it seems to live, it dies eventually. So we come down into the world of death. And the last enemy to be destroyed or to be overcome is death. I enter death and then conquer death to prove that I cannot die. I am an immortal being, for I am all imagination. So everyone in this world is in a state. If I know that, I can lift him out of the state if he requests it. I don't go around looking for people to lift them out. If anyone requests it, it's a very simple technique. You ask of me something that I would ask of you, were I in your state. And so, you ask it of me. What does it cost? Nothing. You're told, come, eat, buy wine, buy milk without money, without price. It costs nothing. You simply create the state. And the state that you create, you put your friend into it. What would it be like if it were true? What would the feeling be like if he really could tell me now that he is the man or she is the woman that they would like to be? Well, then persuade myself that they're telling it to me. Listen as though I'm hearing their voice. See them as though I'm actually seeing them in the flesh. And then go my business. Go about my way. Confident that that thing that I did will work. So we have the permanent spiritual states of the soul through which the individual passes to his redemption. And then we have states that you and I create to deliver men from their present state into which they're fallen. So we fall into a state of being not wanted and feeling sorry for ourselves. That's only a state. You don't have to accept it. You go into a restaurant, you don't say, bring me what the chef wants to get rid of tonight. Bring me a menu. And then you order. Maybe he only has that one order that you want. No one else wants it, but you want it. I go into a restaurant back in New York City a few years ago. It was early, I grant you. It was only 11 in the morning, but I had no breakfast. It was brunch. And I took some friends into the Hilton Hotel. And I went to this Bourbon room. Well, it was Sunday, and I don't dress up for Sunday. I went in with an open shirt. Well, New York hasn't quite caught on to California when it comes to wear. And so the head waiter, all stuffy, and he said, "Button up." And this very, very heavy accent. Well, I have an accent too, so I couldn't criticize him. But here he is with this very, very heavy accent, and he's criticizing my appearance because I had on a jacket, yes, but my shirt was open at the neck. And I'm taking 5 people in to brunch. So I buttoned up the collar, and he gave me a table off the wing, not to be seen by those who were coming with ties and shirts. And then I said, all right, I want clams. The waiter, when the waiter took my order, clams. I said, yes, I want clams. I don't want bacon and eggs, and I don't want the usual breakfast that you think you're going to serve everyone. I want clams for breakfast. Bring me clams. So he delayed, and finally he brought the clams. And I said, come back here, please. This isn't charity. I'm paying for it. Bring me, I want some horseradish, and I want a little Tabasco sauce. Reluctantly he goes and he gets that. But that's what I wanted. I'm paying for it. Well, in life, do the same thing. You just don't go in and say, throw me a tie. You select one from maybe 100. A silly little thing that you put around your neck. But you still want one tie, and you want to pick it out. The same thing is true of these states. Don't let anyone poison you and throw you into a state, because you're going to pay the price of that state. We're only moving through states, but they are a permanent, fixed number of states. And the Bible records them. Every character in that Bible is a state. I am precedes anything that I have ever been. I must precede whatever I claim that I am. I can say I am before, and I must say before I say I'm rich. Riches do not precede me. I am. Then I can say that I am wealthy. I create wealth because I am is the only reality. And I create that which I assume that I am. So if I assume that I am this, that, or the other, I create it in my world. Well, I can assume it not only for myself, I assume it for another. If it comes within the framework of the golden rule, I will do it. If you ask me to say that he has left me in his will, and it's a very, very big estate, will you hear from me that he's dead? Well, don't ask it of me. Go to someone else and ask it, but don't ask it of me. I could not assume that he died because you are in his will. No, go to someone else. And someone said, thrift is a marvelous virtue, especially in an ancestor. And so it's right. Well, I'll go along with that, especially in an ancestor. But I still would not wish him to die because I am a descendant, or named in his will. I use this technique, this law, and it works beautifully, may I tell you. Imagining creates reality. Imagining created these eternal states. And then we go through the states. So, when you meet someone, as you go through life, and they need help, it doesn't cost you anything other than one little moment in the exercise of your talent, which is the gift of God to you, which is himself, which is your own wonderful human imagination. And you simply create him in your mind's eye, whether he be 10,000 miles away. You bring him into your mind's eye and see him as he would like to be seen by the world. And you see him as you would like to see him. And you carry on a mental conversation with him from the premise that he is now already the one he wants to be. And to the degree that you are self-persuaded that he is that, he becomes that. You don't have to raise one finger to make it so. You plant the seed. What do you do after you plant the seed? You leave it. You don't dig it up every morning to see if it has a root. You leave it. A seed must fall into the ground and die before it is made alive. And if it dies, it bears much fruit. And so, you put it into the seed, into the ground of your own wonderful human imagination. Now bear in mind, the vision has its own appointed hour. It ripens. It will flower. If it be long, wait, for it is sure and it will not be late. Not for that seed. One seed may take 24 hours. Another may take, like a hen's egg, 21 days. A little lamb takes 5 months. A horse takes a year. Human being 9 months. So each seed has its own appointed hour. So don't be concerned. You did the work. All you need do is simply leave it alone. and don't raise one finger to make it so, and don't discuss it with anyone else or with the one who asked it of you. If they keep on bothering you by saying, well, when? Don't answer them. You planted it. You did what they asked you to do, and that's all that you can do. If they're anxious about it, then let them bring about their own mental miscarriage. What do you do after pregnancy? There is no such thing as a little pregnancy. Pregnancy, and then in the fullness of time, the child is born. So in the fullness of time, what you did in your imagination will be born. So leave it alone. Every imaginal act grows into a fact. So go about knowing that there are only states in this world, and you, the immortal you, cannot die. About 8 years ago, I was in New York for a month, and two of my brothers, Victor and Lawrence, came up and spent 2 weeks with me in New York City. They checked into the same hotel. They wanted to see everything they could within 2 weeks, and I bought them 14 shows. And sometimes they went even to an afternoon show. They wanted to see everything in the crowded 2 weeks. But the one thing my brother Lawrence wanted to see was the new presentation of Aida. Well, the papers said it was sold out from the very moment that it was stated, a new presentation. Same music, naturally. The same score, but new scenery, something new about it. And this captured the imagination of all opera lovers, and they all wanted to see Aida. The one thing he wanted to see was Aida. But the papers had huge big ads. Not one seat is available. Come down and buy a seat for the other shows. And this was the old Opera House around 40th Street and Broadway. It ran from Broadway to 7th. The old Metropolitan. So this morning we set out. I said, it doesn't really matter. I said, let us go. We have to go down and have lunch anyway. We will go and just see. We got there, and these huge big signs on the outside, no seats for Aida available. And they were plastered all over the Metropolitan. I went in, and there were 3 lines leading towards the 3 windows, selling tickets for the entire season. And there was no seat for Aida. I got into the first line. It was a very long line. Then I saw the 3rd line from me moving more rapidly than the 1st and the 2nd. So I moved over to that line. Then we all moved rapidly forward. As we got to the window, and seemingly no hope of getting tickets. But before I left my hotel room, I simply assumed that I had the ticket for my 2 brothers. I didn't want to go. They wanted to see it. So I assumed that I gave them the ticket. I got into this line, and we moved rapidly towards the window. As we got there to the window, a tall, blond man, he was about, he must have been 5'11", he must have been about 6'4". He stretched his hand up over my head and diverted the ticket seller as he asked a question, while one in front of me is buying seats not for Aida, because that's completely sold out. He is buying 2 other seats for some other opera. Then he departed after he diverted the man's attention, and this man pushed on some bills under the window. And then, as the teller looked at the money, and this man is at the door now, the tall, blond fellow. And he gave this man the ticket, and then suddenly he said, well, he only gave me $3. He should have given me, and he mentioned the money he should have given me. At that, he was bewildered. The teller was bewildered. I turned around and I screamed at that tall blonde. I said, sir. I screamed so loudly he couldn't stop but be attentive. He turned around and said, come back here. You're wanted. He came back like a little child being led by the nose. He came back and he said, what's wrong? And the man said, this is all that he gave me. 2 $1 bills. He said, oh no, you didn't. He gave you 2 10s. Then I said, no, you didn't. I was standing right here. I saw what you did. You gave him 2 $1 bills. That's all that you gave him. The man is flabbergasted. He was so completely dumbfounded, he didn't know what to do. I said, I am standing here. I saw exactly what was done. Then he opened up his purse, and here was a stack of ones, and he had a $20 bill and 2 10s. He said to the man, when will you discover your mistake? Because I gave you 2 10s. And the man said to him, at the end of the season. And with that, it was closed. And the man then took out the money and paid for the ticket and took back his 2 1s. Then I said to him, I want 2 seats for Aida tonight. And I want them in the horseshoe circle. I want them center. He said, yes, sir. And he took from what is called the VIP. They always keep a few out. Though the house is sold out, they always keep a few seats for those who are coming, called the very important people. Well, I am certainly not a very important person. But I saved him from the loss of $20. And he quickly took the 2 seats out and said to me, $20. I gave him the $20, went back and gave the 2 seats to my brothers. Now, a state called a thief. These 2 men have chosen to be thieves in their world. They're con men. It's perfectly all right. God made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the time of trouble. Read that in the 16th chapter, the 4th verse of Proverbs. He made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble. Well, the day of trouble may not be a war. I was troubled. How to get these tickets? That's a moment of trouble. And I simply assumed that I had them. And I simply played my part in my imagination before I left my hotel room, that my brothers are going to see this show this night of Aida, the new presentation of Aida. Then 2 who have already given themselves over to the state of a thief. They had to actually come right into the line. I took the first line, then I moved over to the 3rd line because I saw it moving more rapidly. So he comes over to the 3rd line and plays his part beautifully. If he had not done what he did, I would not have received those tickets because I am not a very important person. But the man looked me in the eyes and said, here is an honest man. As far as he is concerned, I am an honest man who saved him from losing $20. And so he quickly took out the 2 seats. I paid for them, naturally, didn't give them to me. I was willing to pay for my seats, but you couldn't buy them. All over the place, sold out, sold out, sold out, all over the Metropolitan Opera. You could paste it on the walls. and there's a huge big ad in the paper. Aida is sold out. And I went that day and got those seats right in the circle, in center row for my two brothers, because one man played his part beautifully. He has given himself over to a con man. He finds it easier to make a living being a con man than those who are pickpockets. There are schools that teach people to be pickpockets. Do you know that? They come right out of the school and go into a profession. All right, that's their part. They play that part. Now you play your part beautifully, and one of them can be instrumental in getting you what you want in this world. So I wanted 2 seats for Aida. Were it not for a con man in that world, I would not have had those 2 seats. So he comes into the line where I was in the line. He comes forward, and just as I got to the ticket window, he puts his hand over my head to divert the man's attention. And the one in front of me, who is buying 2 seats, not for Aida because you can't get them. He is buying 2 seats for something else. And he puts out $2 bills instead of 2 10s. And then this man starts, and I turned around as though I was inspired. And with my full voice, I said, "Sir, come back here." He had to come back. So he came on back just like a little child and stood next to me, and he looked down at me. He wouldn't dare budge. When I said, "You didn't give him anything more than what he's showing you now. You give him exactly what he's showing you." Because I was here and I stood next to you. He was helpless. He couldn't hit me. He was many inches my height. I'm 5'11", and he may be about 6'5" or more. A strong, strapping blonde. But he was impotent in my presence when I called him back. He only played the part. So should I not forgive him? There are infinite states in this world, and all you have to do is forget states. You play your part, and every state necessary to make your part come to fulfillment will be present at the moment that you need it. And so we went over to Longchamp for lunch, and my brother Lawrence and Victor, they had their tickets, and that evening they went to see Aida. I can see all these things in my world where people play so many marvelous parts. My brothers thought that I was very courageous with this giant over my head to do what I did. It wasn't any courage. At that moment I saw what he did. And when I said to him, "You didn't do it at all. I saw what you did. You stuck $2 there, and there they are. You didn't give him any $10 bills." He opened up his purse, and I saw all these ones, oodles of ones, and then a 20 and a couple of 10s at the side. And then he pulled out the 10s and gave them and took his 2 ones back. And then he went back to the door with the other partner of his and looked at me as though he could have killed me, but he didn't have the guts to hit me. He couldn't. If I were that big, he could not have struck me, because I was speaking on an entirely different level. And on that level, when I knew I was going to get my seats, that's all that concerned me. Here comes the 2 seats. And the man said, "Yes, sir." He treated me as though I stood before him as the president. And he thought, now here was an honest man who saved me $20. I'm only playing the part. I only wanted 2 seats that night, because that's all that my brothers could give, because I had all these seats bought for them. All the shows on Broadway at the time within 2 weeks, and they went night after night, and matinees and everything else. Got it right up to their heads in shows. So here, I hope you heard it clearly. I hope I made it as clear as I can. that you will go out knowing who you are. You are dual beings. But the first man is of the dust, and to dust he returns. That is the man of earth. The second man is the Lord from heaven, and he cannot die. That's your own wonderful human imagination. It cannot die. But it sleeps embodied in this tomb. And one day it will awaken.